From the 28-yard line of Auburn. Bama going left to right. Bryce gets the snap, knee high. Looks, throws the fade route, near side end zone. Got it! Caught! Touchdown, Alabama! Caught by Ja'Cory Brooks in the end zone.
And Chris Davis takes it to the back of the end zone. He'll run it out to the 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis! Oh my God! Davis is going to run it all the way back! Auburn's going to win the football game! Auburn's going to win the football game!
And Alabama has come from nowhere to defeat the Auburn Tigers in multiple overtimes.
Welcome. It's week 2 here on Tide and Tigers. We are happy to be back. Chance, it was a crazy week. A perfect week to get started with this show. Not only with the Iron Bowl, that was probably the least craziest game of the whole weekend, but rivalry week was unbelievable. Why is my microphone? Is it ghost in the room moving my microphone? Again, he can't do this without doing his production side of it. It's part of hosting and producing, I guess, but we are so excited to be back, but also, like I said, I think it was perfect timing with the week we had. It was a crazy week in college football. I can't wait to get to discussing everything. The Iron Bowl, we'll both get into our segments a little bit later, but the game kind of went how I thought it was going to go. Auburn did play very well. They won the turnover battle. It was...
Well, when you're not scoring off those turnovers,
Yes.
You're not winning the battle like you need to.
I thought it was a very boring Iron Bowl.
Oh, my goodness. I agree.
I hate to say that in our Tide and Tigers show, but it just wasn't, when you're watching Bo Nix and Jameis Winston throw up all these crazy things on Monday night, that was an entertaining game, even with interceptions and everything, but I just felt like it was a very lackluster game compared to a lot of the other games we got this during rivalry week. So we'll start out Thursday night, Thanksgiving. Wasn't really, the Egg Bowl's usually on Thanksgiving. I think NFL is really just taken over Thanksgiving. So not many college games on Thanksgiving Day. I think there was just one, not really much to talk about. But Friday, maybe one of the craziest games I've ever watched. It was a late night game too, and there were so many people going into the Saturday games. Like, I stayed up late watching that Georgia Tech
Oh my
game.
goodness, so good. We were texting back and forth our whole group chat for what?
Hours.
Yeah.
We were on that game. We were on that game big time. We all said Georgia Tech was way better than that line that was out at 19. They not only covered, they outplayed Georgia the whole entire game. It was a masterclass performance by Georgia Tech, but they still fall short. Brent Key, a former Trustful alum, big shout out to him. He had those boys ready. Hayes King, unbelievable game.
Hayes King is a great quarterback, and I guess he's going to come back next year because I saw Zach Pyron, the Pinson kid. I saw he's entering the transfer portal, which good luck to him. I really wish he would have stayed at Georgia Tech for his future there, but I think they've got a good future ahead of them at Georgia Tech.
Have you seen that kind of guts from a quarterback?
From King? Oh, my goodness.
The performance he had, and I think the most disappointing thing of all that, and what we talked about the most, was when they got into overtime, one of the 8 overtimes, he was running it down their throats all night with QB power, QB zone, and they don't run it one time in overtime. The one time they run him, I think, was in the 6th overtime, and they're 4 wide, and they're faking it and then running him. I just didn't understand why Georgia Tech went away with what got them in that game or dominated that game. That just was very surprising to me.
And with Brent Key being an offensive lineman himself, you would think he'd want that tough-nosed football, running the ball, right? I don't understand where his play actions and pass happy came from, but I guess he had a plan that just didn't work out for him.
Yeah, and a lot of those overtimes, I think that I remember the Iron Bowl a couple years ago that had a similar game like that. They got very pass happy there. I just think that people think you're not going to be able to run it for 3 yards, but a lot of times teams that do it, Georgia does it to win the game. They ran the football and scored.
Yep.
By the way, dumbest overtime rule I've ever.
And I guess it is going to carry over.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was a big question. I think Big Cat brought it up with Barstool, but is this the same rules in the playoffs? And it is.
Yeah. NFL
has finally changed their overtime rules where both teams get the ball. I guess they're trying to eliminate things going into 7 overtimes, like the famous A&M and LSU game. It still went into 8 overtimes. So it didn't,
And your brother brought up a good point, too. How much time does it actually save with this new rule? Because they weren't even going for commercial breaks, but they were still taking the 30 to 45 seconds in between each extra point.
Why are they walking to
opposite ends? Because that's taking even more time.
Yes.
Like,
they're walking to other sides of the fields. Like, again, I just, you eliminate the kicker from the game, which, again, that has hurt so many people in overtime, is having that kicker miss kicks. The kicker is eliminated after the game. So,
right.
So it just, I don't like the rule. They need to change it. And I say go to the 25 or either kick off to both teams and let both teams get the – I like the new NFL rule, the playoff rule. They don't do it in the regular season. Let both teams get the ball, and you have to drive the field. It just
right now, it's essentially flag football rules. For when you go into overtime in flag football, you both go for an extra point. It's the same concept.
And again, whoever made that rule needs to be fired immediately. Because, again, this game was a playoff implementing game. The Bama game was a playoff implementing game a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to come down to a big-time game. It's going to go into triple overtime. You're going to come down to a whole season is going to come down to a 2-point conversion.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
And it wasn't like this was the first game to introduce the idea of it being an issue. The Auburn Texas A&M game.
Yes.
That was when a lot of SEC fans started to see, this is going to be a problem later on, and now it is.
Well, the Iron Bowl a couple years ago,
True.
Bryce Young, throws the touchdown to win the game, and it just – I don't think games should be settled like that. And if it takes forever, it takes forever. I actually enjoy the overtime games. I don't know who.
I want to stay up till 1 a.m. for it. Who cares?
It was a funny thing going back to coaching, and they were telling somebody was complaining about there were too many baseball games in the season at the youth level for the rec. And so they went back, and I'm like, well, if people are complaining about more games, baseball may not be for them. If you're complaining about more overtimes, then maybe you don't need to be watching football, because all of us were loving every second of it. And that A&M LSU game a couple years ago that went to 7 overtimes, maybe my favorite game of all time. So, I just...
The only thing that you don't love about an overtime game is when your team has a 8-point or a 9-point spread, and it's not getting covered at that point. You're screwed.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And it picks, usually a pick on the second team. Yeah, it's a very much... I remember one time a couple of years ago when Oklahoma played Georgia in the Rose Bowl, and you're like, okay, you had a team by 6 points. There's no way they're not going to cover.
Yeah.
Well, the first team scored a touchdown, and they fumbled the ball, and so the team won by 7. You're like, how does this even happen? But it does happen. So the Egg Bowl was the other game. I wasn't impressed at all with Ole Miss. This is 2 weeks in a row. I thought coming back after the Florida game and losing the Florida game, they come out guns blazing. They were up 17-14 at halftime. They only scored 9 points in the second half. They won that game They won that game by 8 points. 12 points.
Yeah. Geez.
It just not an impressive day. Van Buren looked pretty good for besides he threw a couple picks, but he looked pretty good for Mississippi State. But Dart throws for 143 yards. Ole Miss, they're complaining that they should be in the playoff. It's kind of how you're playing at the end. I feel like that really impresses these people that make these decisions for the 12-team playoff.
Which, of course, we'll get into about with Alabama.
Yes, but Ole Miss is trending the wrong way. And
yes.
I don't think that, to me, they haven't done anything down the stretch that says, man, that team is a top 12 team in the country. So,
no. South Carolina could have made that argument, but they didn't beat Clemson enough. I don't think.
So you're jumping.
I am jumping ahead. Sorry.
And that's completely fine. We're about to jump into the Saturday games, and let's start with that game. Does anybody want to play South Carolina right now in a playoff? I mean,
Sellers he's pretty much a Lamar Jackson right now style player.
So I was going to say Vince Young.
Or Vince Young. That's actually what you said in the messages, and I said he might be the Vince Young with the stats he was putting up, and I guess I just went with Lamar. But yeah, you're right, Vince Young. That's his exact style.
Freshman.
Yep.
Okay, so he is going to be a monster. And I think the craziest thing about, because I like Clemson in the game, I picked Clemson. That was one of my losses this weekend. Was that you knew down the stretch that Lenore Sellers was going to run the football, and they couldn't stop it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot like that USC game when Vince Young just kept, and there's a lot of games that were with Vince Young like that, but it was like, what they're going to do, and yet he runs for 166 yards and two touchdowns. He throws for 164 yards. 166 yards rushing from a quarterback, that's incredible. I mean, it just was like, how does Clemson not know? Why are there not 2 spies on him? I just don't think they were gonna. They couldn't even bring him down.
No,
you know?
yeah, he's a tough runner, and he's very smart with his vision. He knows where to go and not get hit.
Just an incredible win for Beamer and South Carolina. Incredible season for them. I mean, they've I think won like 6 or 7 straight games now, and they're a team that's on the edge of the outside of the playoffs. You know, South Carolina, like I said, they're a team that is nobody wants to play. And I hope they get a great bowl game because, so they've won 6 straight games.
Wasn't their loss that shocked everybody to Mississippi State?
They lost to LSU 36-33. They lost to Ole Miss 27-3.
Ole Miss.
And then they should have beat Bama or had chances to beat Bama. They lost 27-25. But they've beaten 6 straight teams, 3 of them in the top 25. So they have a better resume than most of these other teams that are in there and played a harder schedule. But again, they have a redshirt freshman quarterback. They're going to get a good bowl game, and they're going to all come play in this bowl game because they're a younger team. Yeah. So I can't wait to see what South Carolina does next year. But I would have loved to see a team like this in the playoffs. It reminded me of a couple teams a couple years ago that did make the Final Four. They're like, man, if that team got in, they probably would win the whole thing. Like Georgia last year.
Yeah.
Georgia, they beat 63-3. They beat Florida State or whatever it was. If that team would have made the playoffs, they probably would have won the championship. South Carolina could make a run in the playoffs if they get in. I'm just telling you that right now because that kid is special.
He is. He's very special.
All right, so let's go to the next game.
Or back up to Michigan. We skipped at Michigan, Ohio State.
We skipped it.
Because of me.
We'll just go back to reverse. So we'll go to the big game. It was the first game of the day. Actually, both these games were the early games.
But this was the one, Fox, everything, yeah.
I don't know what to say. I mean, this to me was maybe one of the biggest upsets in the last 25 years.
Yeah, I kind of thought Ohio State would run away with it.
There's a couple times where I think there's been top teams. I know Florida's had a big win over Florida State when Florida State was undefeated, but Florida was a top 25 team. This Michigan team was 6-5, I believe, and Ohio State is the number 2 team in the country, 21-point favorite. And you would think after losing to Michigan like they've lost to Michigan, this would be the year they would just go up and, like I think McAfee said on game day, they're going to blow them out. And Michigan goes into Michigan was 6-5. Michigan goes into Columbus and beats them. I mean, Ryan Day has to be just. He can't sleep right now. He already said he couldn't sleep when they lose there. He said it was worse than almost losing his dad or something like that, which is crazy. But there's no way they should have lost this game, and they do. That is huge because Bryce Underwood's coming in next year, number 1 quarterback in the country. Like, Michigan's only going to get better. You can't lose to them in a year they're down. I mean, what do you think of this game?
I thought Ohio State was going to run away with it, obviously, with my picks. That was one of my losses. But it's kind of reminiscent, not with being number 2, but remember the year with Trey Smith having to be the running back for Auburn, and they come in and upset Alabama with like a bunch of backups? That's kind of how this game felt. It felt like Michigan really didn't have a full put-together team, and they were just coming in to try to be an upset city, and that's what they were.
Chance, they won without a quarterback. He threw for 62 yards and 2 interceptions. Their leading receiver had 18 yards.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
18, I mean... And Will Howard stumping on the cigarette and mocking Indiana last week. I think it was karma. Like, he's not a top 10 quarterback in the country. Yet he walks around and acts like he is because he's got, the team that they have at Ohio State.
Yeah.
Jeremiah Smith's incredible. But he did not improve. And he threw 2 picks. They ran the ball for 77 yards. Michigan's defense, shout out to them. Jeremiah Smith had 35 yards.
Maybe it's just Michigan's got their number. Connor Stallions gave them so much info for the past 10 years that they just won't ever lose to Ohio State. It's like Alabama right now with Auburn. They beat us, 5 years in a row, 6 years in a row?
Well, I go back to this, and this resounds so much now, and we'll talk about Ryan Day and now what do you think his future is. They win in Columbus. They always have, and they'll probably still make the playoff, but they're not even playing in the Big Ten Championship. It's Penn State versus Oregon. Which, by the way, that line's way too low.
Yeah,
we'll get to that later.
Yeah.
But Ryan Day, famous quote from Jim Harbaugh before he left, said, "You can talk a lot of crap, but you hit a triple, or you end up on third base and you think you hit a triple." So let's get that right. You end up on third base somehow, or you start on third base and you think you hit a triple. That's the right quote.
It's baseball. I don't know those quotes.
So pretty much Ryan Day walked into a position with Meyer leaving where he had everything handed to him.
Yeah.
He didn't recruit these kids, and they go out and have unbelievable years. And now he's got his kids in there. They're not beating Michigan. They're not going to the Big Ten championship. They haven't won a national title. So, like I said, it's one of those terms of like you got handed everything, and yet you think you've done everything when really you've done nothing. And now you've lost, I believe, 3 straight years to Michigan.
And he could
even good.
And he could lose a lot of his games and still beat Michigan and be as secured with his job. But he's not doing the one thing that Ohio State has to do for bragging rights.
Yeah, and to me, like I said, this is the year they're down. You can't lose in the year they're down. Like, you have to go and stomp them and set a precedence that this is what it's going to be like the next 4 or 5 years. Y'all got us with Harbaugh, but this is not happening. So, yes, 3 straight years they've beaten them. And, again, this year, last 2 years, Michigan was ranked 3rd and 5th. That was top – it's been a top 5 matchup the last almost 4 or 5 years. And this year, Michigan's not even ranked, and they beat them in Columbus. It's just shocking. Again, like I said, I think it was the worst upset in 25 years, in the Big Ten at least. Like that just when a quarterback throws for 60 yards and your number one receiver catches it for 18 yards and you beat a number 2 team in the country at their place.
62 yards and 2 interceptions. Goodness.
Look at the top receiver. He had 18 yards. He's changed the stats now. I just can't believe. But let's talk about what happened after the game that seemed to set a precedence for the rest of rivalry weekend.
Right. And I think the whole world's at a split with this. Like, we don't like disrespect happening to us, but in a sense, that's what this is all about. It's rivalry. You talk your trash, you disrespect your opponent,
yes.
And then after the game, this is where I think I differ than a lot of people, maybe even you in this. I think the flag planting is okay. First, it's on turf, so you're really not – what are you going to break the turf? No.
Yeah.
So that one was funny to me. But second, we aren't in wars anymore. But that is what it symbolizes when we are in battle for sports. You're trying to dominate the other person in their home stadium, on their turf. So when you conquer that, I feel like that's just like us planting the flag after a battle that America won. Same thing with these teams. That's how they feel. That's what they're doing. That's my view.
And the boiling comes over with usually the team that lost is upset. But again, I love it. I love all the years at Florida State, Alabama, Auburn, they get in each other's faces. It's a big deal. That's what rivalry week is about. If you don't want the flag planted, don't lose to a team that's not in the top 25 at your home place.
It used to be before the game, didn't players used to go out to like the 50 and start
messing
up the logos and stuff? Like,
that was back when Florida State was the number 1 rivalry. It's not anymore, and we'll get to that game next. But yes, it gets to Florida planting the flag, and Mark Norvell comes and grabs the flag
from his own team.
Shaking his own, like, does he really think Billy Napier said, "Hey, go plant the flag"? Norvell is a joke. I cannot stand. It's not because I just don't like Florida State. I think he's an absolute joke. Like he went from undefeated season, he gets blown out in the bowl game, and then he comes back this year and goes 2-10, and you're over there stealing a flag from a college kid, like. You're just upset because your team, and Stephen A. Smith said the exact same thing. It's like, go worry about bigger things, bro. Shake the other guy's hand and get out of there. Stop going and messing with 20-year-old kids. They're just having fun and just enjoying the rivalry moment. How many times have I seen a Gator head and those guys having Gator heads and taunting taunting Gator players over the years? They've done it. So it's just like, a coach should never step in that situation.
Yeah.
If the players want to handle it, let them handle it.
And we did see in the Michigan and Ohio State game where security and cops stepped in with pepper spray.
Yeah,
they pepper sprayed some of the players.
Like, jeez Louise. Yeah, that it got pretty aggressive towards the end of that game, and they would not separate. But
could you imagine being a Michigan player in that situation? I won! Ow! I hurt!
But yeah, the Gator.
Here we go. I pulled it up right
here.
The
Florida State game was just. It was dominant performance. The whole game. Lagway played great. I think he made one mistake on interception. But Florida ran for 235 yards. I think sacked the quarterback 5 or 6 times. I mean, Florida State's just not good. I mean, I watched the whole.
They spend a lot of money, but
they are just not a good football team. And Florida is peaking at the right time. Lagway looks like he's the quarterback of the future, the one they've been looking for since Tebow or Trask. I hate to say that Trask was a 1 year kind of 2 year kind of thing, but Lagway is going to be there for 3 years.
And he's finally developing now.
He's finally developing. Napier has saved his job. Florida has gone from 50 to 10 in the recruiting classes. It is early signing day today. So I think things are trending in the right way in Gainesville. Florida State is scrambling. They've hired Gus Malzahn as their offensive coordinator.
Which everywhere he goes, he tends to have a winning season to start, and then he kind of falls off.
They also hired a coach from Nebraska to be their defensive coordinator. So they're firing everybody but Norvell. And, I never thought Norvell was a good coach. I think he got lucky with the portal and landed 5 or 6 really good portal players that all are in the pros right now. I mean, the 2 defensive ends for the Rams, Keon Coleman starting for the Bills. Travis was an unbelievable quarterback.
That didn't have enough time there, honestly.
So they all are starring in the NFL, and they just all had a really good year. The running backs were really good that year. We talked about that last week. I just don't think he's a good coach. And again, they're scrambling now and firing everybody except him. I'm putting him on hot seat alert. If he doesn't have a good year next year, they're going to have to pay out like $60 million to get rid of this guy, and I think they'll do it because I just don't think they're going to have a good year next year. I'm calling it. FSU is not any. They're not 2-10, but I'm calling like 4-6 next year.
It's crazy because of the NIL era that we've witnessed lately. Is a team can be terrible and like go with 2-8 the year before, and after just adding 1 or 2 players in the transfer portal, they're now an 8-4 team or whatever. It's crazy.
But again, do you live off that? We talked about this earlier on my way up there, or last night actually. Do you live off like Miami's doing with Cam Ward? They had a great year. Again, they don't really do what they want to do because they don't make the playoffs and they're not in the ACC championship game. But then next year you got nothing.
Yeah,
we're like Florida is now got a freshman quarterback. South Carolina, same thing. That this guy's going to be here for 2 or 3 years, and you're building a program off this. How easy is it to recruit for Florida right now? Saying, hey, you can play with Lagway for 2 years. You can come play with Bryce Underwood at Michigan for 3 years.
You can hope it's that many years. Again, what if they get a better offer in the offseason?
Again, I think we've yet to see a quarterback that's a starting quarterback that's a top
leave.
Yeah.
So. That's a tough question to answer, but I also had a question about
Sam Hartman maybe would won that he was a Wake Forest, but Notre Dame was a bigger school. Like I don't think somebody's going to come off for. I mean, Lagway's
right, not off of a top tier school down to start somewhere else. Yeah. But what's more exciting for a team right now? Is it National Signing Day starting, or is it transfer portal opening? Yeah. Because I feel like the biggest impact now is transfer portal. We don't see very many freshman recruits, except for in Auburn's case, where you're having to start them immediately at receiver. We don't see that tend to be the impact as it used to be.
Yeah.
Now it's more of who can we get from where someone else was good.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, I'll talk about this later in my segment. I think something I want to bring up to you is somebody like a Cam Coleman or somebody like a Ryan Williams. You don't know the future at quarterback for Alabama and Auburn. That's a huge deal of your receivers to have a good quarterback.
Yeah.
If they start looking at some of these schools with quarterbacks and saying, hey, I may want to go play with this guy for a couple of years, then watch Auburn do the ring around the rosy for the next 2 years.
Yeah.
I think it's an important thing to talk about. I mean, Jalen Milroe has struggled down the stretch, and Peyton Thorne hasn't had the best run down the stretch. I mean, Cam Coleman, imagine putting him with a top-tier quarterback. That guy's amazing.
Imagine putting Sellers on Auburn.
Yeah.
Come to Auburn,
again,
Lenoris.
Do you think Auburn's in a situation now where, okay, you're recruiting. I think they got a quarterback coming in, but do you go with the skill set you have now? I think they're more of a Miami situation. They got a good team. They played, the defense played pretty well against Alabama. They just don't have the quarterback.
Yeah.
Do you need to go get that big-time quarterback out of the transfer portal?
I do think we need to. We tried it, obviously, with Thorne. Didn't work. And we committed with him, but then we tried to replace him twice in the season, once with Hank Brown, once with Walker White. Neither one of them was able to produce what we needed them to, but they're also very young.
Yeah.
So I think we'll have great backups, but we need that junior or senior that just needs a full team of athletes around him to come in and make a difference for Auburn.
And yeah, I mean, again, I compared a lot to the Cam Ward situation. Like I think that Auburn needs. They got the skill set around the guy. I'm looking at this right here. All right, so you're looking at the quarterbacks coming in next year, at least the pro style guys. Auburn doesn't have a guy in the top 25. Obviously, LSU's got the number one guy. Bama's got the.
Yeah, I think that kind of says a lot. Auburn's already looking at transfer portal instead of recruiting.
Well, it may be dual threat. I think it is dual threat.
Yes. Okay.
All right, so yes, Deuce Knight. I knew that. I looked at the pro style guys. So Bama's got the number one dual threat quarterback, and Auburn's got the number two dual threat quarterback. So both 6'4", both about 185. So both of them got big time talents coming in. Both of them 4 or 5 star guys. So Auburn does have a future guy coming in.
I think if we can go get like the kid from USC, if he wants to come to, but is he a junior? See, I think we need a senior because if we do have a freshman like him coming in, we need to be able to start him after his redshirt year and let him do a Lenore Sellers dynasty.
You saw what Florida did with Lagway this year. They played him every third series, and I think that was preparing for the future, thinking we're not going to win the national championship this year, which I didn't really understand because I felt like Napier was on the hot seat, so he should have played to win every game and not play for the future. But I think Lagway was his joker in the hole of saying, hey, this guy likes me, he's staying here, I'm staying here. And down the stretch, that experience, now Lagway's going into a sophomore year where he's played every SEC game. That's going to be huge for them. So, but yeah, I agree with you. I think they go get a senior quarterback and then get Deuce Knight and get him reps, getting some things going and then play towards the future. But they said Cam Coleman's going to want somebody who can throw the football to him. And, it's going to be a big year. Or actually a big offseason.
KLS is a senior, right?
KLS
He's gone.
Senior, yes. So you're looking at possibly, some teams coming in, I think, and, Auburn's got money. I think they can keep Cam, but they got to find him a quarterback. So, all right, so moving along to our next big upset, Miami-Syracuse.
That ruined so many people's parlays. I'm pretty sure it knocked off like 8 of mine from the start.
Yeah. And again, now Miami finishes the season 10-2. But it's a very, very lackluster 10-2. Chance they didn't play a top 25 team all year.
They had a bunch of highlight games on TV because of Cam Ward, but a lot of them also were him coming back and having to win from behind.
Chance, he threw for 350 and 2 touchdowns and lost the game because their defense couldn't stop a soul.
Let me get back to that.
McCord, the former Ohio State quarterback, by the way, the one they let go for Will Howard, threw for 380 and 3 touchdowns. I told you it was a trap game. Syracuse plays well in that stadium up there. It's the big dome.
You did say it was a trap game.
I did say, and McCord had an unbelievable game. He kind of threw some shade to Ohio State, but that kid, they're 9-3. I mean, they're a good team. So both quarterbacks throw for over 350. Both throw for over 2 touchdowns. It was a shootout, and again,
look at their ratings: 92.8 and 90.9.
Unbelievable quarterback play, but again, Miami. Look at Restrepo.
Oh my gosh, he's unreal.
Yeah, he's a really good player. It was a good story they had on Game Day on him a couple weeks ago. But he to me, the Miami just really, they've been playing with fire all year, and fire bites them again. And I think it cost them the playoffs. And I was really looking forward to seeing Cam in that offense.
The turnover battles where it came into play.
Yeah, and they both lost 1 fumble, so it was really the same. But they knock them out of the ACC championship game. This is very similar to Ohio State, except Ohio State, it's not going to cost them the playoffs. It's going to cost Miami the playoffs because Ohio State has played good competition and played some top 25 games. If you look at Miami's schedule, if you pull that up right there, Chance, they haven't played a top 25 team all year, and I just don't see what their argument is, knowing that your biggest quality win is maybe Florida at this point. Like
maybe Florida, they lost to Georgia Tech, who didn't end their season on a high note either, so that hurts them.
Yeah, but I mean, gosh, and think how quick Georgia Tech could have been. Georgia Tech could have beaten Miami, Miami, Florida State and Georgia. What a year that would be for Brent Key. So that's almost what an unbelievable year he had. But yeah, just look at that. There's not. You don't play one top 25 team, you don't deserve to go to the playoff. I'm sorry.
Miami only looked good in the month of September, really.
Yeah, and every other game, look at that. 39-38, 38-34, 52-45. Defense is getting shredded. Florida just played him at the wrong time. I think if you flop that game, I think maybe in a different game. But Cam, unbelievable season. I still think he should go to New York. I think he's a top 4 or 5 player in the country. I would put him with Travis Hunter and Ashton Jeanty and those guys. But Cam with unbelievable season. But Miami, I just think that they're going to look back at this season and think, what if?
Yeah.
In both games they lost were on the road, so they didn't even lose at home this year. So anyways, yeah, a great game that was, and props to Syracuse. And both teams, I think, had really good seasons. But I think Miami's going to be the one that thinks, like I said, they left the cup a little bit empty when it could have been a lot more and a playoff team, which everybody thought that had them in the whole year.
I mean, yeah, once you saw Cam Ward early in the season and what he was bringing to him, you thought this is definitely going to be one of the top 14 teams in the country.
Yeah, it's 12, but not 14.
Or 12, I meant. Yep.
It's confusing. Every year, Chance, it gets confusing. So, all right, we'll go to the big game in the SEC where game day was. It was to determine who was going to play Georgia in the SEC championship game. 17-7, Texas. A&M's only points were off a pick six. So
what was the line for this too?
I think 3.5. So Texas covered the spread. I thought Texas was going to cover the spread, and they did.
Yeah.
Really was a defensive battle. Texas didn't score in the second half. How many games in a top 20 matchup you don't score in the second half and you still win the game? And you still win the game and you cover. And the other team does score. So, I mean, just...
Oh, yeah, that number 25 for Texas A&M, Dalton Brooks.
Yes.
He is a beast on defense.
You looked at A&M had 6 tackles for loss.
Yeah.
Just the pick six. I mean, unbelievable defense again. They did everything. It's just Marcus Reed, he has just kind of been up and down all year. And 8-4 record kind of describes that. But you'll go back up to Reed's stats. It wasn't, 146 yards. He ran for 60 yards. But it just, Texas got a great defense. Quinn had a pretty good game. I was worried because the injury and how that was all going to play out. But
how many times were they even in the red zone, A&M?
It wasn't much.
That's what I was thinking. They really weren't close to scoring. Yeah, that's their problem.
And again, like I said, the couple times they did, Reed fumbled the ball, and again, the only time they scored was a pick six. So
yeah,
that and the Alabama game were two very just
lackluster.
Yeah, because there were just so many entertaining games on the weekend. But that was one of the ones that just I was expecting a lot more out of both teams. And again, I don't know what that means for Texas going in. You had Georgia escaping Georgia Tech. That'll be a big game. We'll talk about later for the SEC championship game. So next game, Tennessee Vanderbilt. I think that a lot of people were thinking, could your boy Diego
Pavia
pull off another upset?
I wanted him to. Obviously, that's where I had my money at too. It didn't work out.
So they up 17-0 though. I mean, it's 17-0, and you're thinking, this is like, whoa, what is going on here? And Nico in Tennessee, a lot of credit to Josh Heupel. This is a playoff team, and he has done everything to bring this program back to relevance, and they have. And, like I said, very impressed with Tennessee coming back and winning that game.
It doesn't matter what you do. When you're up 17-0 at one point, if you allow for 9 yards an average for a pass and 4 touchdowns from their quarterback, you are not going to win.
And do you know what I thought was impressive to me? He didn't abandon the run. If you watch that game, most teams, when they get down big, all they do is throw the ball, and it usually gets picked. The rushers are pinning their ears back. They ran for 281.
I mean, yeah, they had 2 runners that averaged over 10 carries in the game.
Yeah, and 2 guys averaged over 7 yards a carry. But, yes, Sampson runs for 178 yards. Sometimes you overthink it too much. Like Key did. I keep going back to Georgia Tech. But, you can't abandon everything if you get down 17-0. There's a lot of game left. Tennessee runs the no huddle, and they didn't abandon the game plan, and it worked out. And they come back and they really dominated the game from the second quarter on. So big props to Tennessee. They make the playoff.
It also shows their depth right here. Look on their receiving. Tennessee has 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 players who touched the ball compared to Vanderbilt having 5.
Well, and you had to think going into this year with Jalen Hyatt leaving and the guys they had leaving, it was going to have to be a receiver by committee. Yeah. And it looks like with that's what they're doing. And, they're in a good situation because they're not I'm sure they'd rather be playing for an SEC championship game, but they're in the playoff.
Yeah.
And so that, congratulations to Tennessee. One other game I wanted to ask you about,
or players.
Players I wanted to ask you about. We got the Heisman coming up. Colorado 52-0. What an impressive performance. Hunter's got 3 touchdowns and a pick. And then Genty for Boise State runs for another 250 plus. Those two guys have to be the favorites for the Heisman. Travis Hunter, to me, like, what he's doing on both sides of the ball is incredible. I just don't think that he should win the Heisman. I think Genty has been the best player all year, and he's doing things that I've never seen, maybe since Barry Sanders.
Yes.
I know the competition hasn't been there, but look at Colorado's schedule real quick. To me, Boise's played Oregon. And Genty, had a great game against them. But
these are his stats against all them.
How many top 25 teams has Colorado played? 1.
1, yeah.
So it's not like he's playing this crazy competition either. But, you look at the games, he's usually, he's 100 yards a game, most games. And then, the interceptions on top of it. Nothing to knock against Travis Hunter. He's an incredible player. But I just think, looking at Genty's numbers, he's had the better year overall and most consistent year. I think he's got to win the Heisman, but I don't think he will. I think Hunter's going to win the Heisman.
See, I want Genty to win also. I did a future bet on that one anyways, but unfortunately, I think whoever doesn't win this year between the two is going to be robbed. I know Travis Hunter's going to win probably 5 or 6 awards alone and maybe not win the Heisman, but people are still going to argue that he should. And I agree. Any other year, he should.
Yeah.
But Genty is a man among boys, and he's still not even a senior.
He's 800 yards. 800 yards more than the next guy in college football. He's ran for 2,200 yards.
And the stat I pulled up the other day, his yards after contact is, I think, over anybody else's total yards.
Yeah.
Not even.
I think that you look and though Hunter is 5th in the country in receiving yards and he's 15th in interceptions. So he's got 4 picks and he's top 5 receiving. That's never been done, So I think that, to me, that was the more impressive thing about Hunter's year, because he had no knock on Travis Hunter, but he's a top 5 receiver in the country in yards. Like, I did not see that coming from him this year. I saw him more of a DB and playing more DB in the NFL in the future, but he's proved he's a big-time receiver, man.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a big-time receiver in high school in the first years, but, you don't just go get top 5 receiving yards in the country.
No.
So I guess, to me, I would probably have, Cam Ward, Genty, and Travis Hunter as the 3 Heisman finalists. If you want to throw one more, would you put Shedeur Sanders up there?
I don't put Shedeur up there because then that obviously says that Hunter's not a Heisman finalist, because that means he's not the game changer for the entire team. And that's usually what a Heisman finalist needs to be. Usually. Alabama can argue because they've had so many that were on a part of teams that any of them could have been Heisman.
Well, and Reggie Bush, actually, I think him and Leinart were Heisman finalists.
They were.
Been teammates? I think maybe them two that were Heisman finalists together.
Alabama, didn't they have Mark Ingram and
it was just Ingram.
So, it was.
Yeah, so I think that this would be the first time there would be 2 Heisman finalists from the same team since the Matt Leinart.
Richardson didn't have somebody else.
Was it 2003 Heisman finalist?
2003 or 4.
I'll look it up real quick. Yeah, 2003 Heisman finalists were. No, it was the wrong year.
It has to be 4 or 5. 4.
You're right. It's 5, I believe.
It is 5. The USC and Texas was 05.
Reggie Bush, Vince Young, and Matt Leinart, and I think Brady Quinn may have been a finalist too.
Probably Notre Dame.
So yes, it'd be the first time since 2005 that 2 teammates were high, and it didn't affect Reggie Bush that year.
Yeah.
So Yeah, I think it'll be Shador, Cam, Travis, and Genty. Now, you don't think Shador, is there anybody else you would think? Usually they take 4 guys.
Yeah, usually. I mean, earlier in the season, I probably would have said Milrow until all the stats and everything came out. But after the entire season, if Vandy could have done a little bit better, I would have said Pavia. Yeah. But no, I can't think of a 4th. I can't.
Okay. All right. So like I said, we're both thinking that Genty should win, but Travis Hunter will probably win. But a great season, a lot of parity this year. I think, recapping that was just, there is so many teams. Everything was so even this year. There wasn't really one team, even Oregon, they haven't really blown everybody out and had this season where, like, this team's going to be the favorite to win the national championship. I think there's about 6 or 7 teams that can win the national championship, and that's why I love it's the perfect year for a playoff. This is the perfect year because I think there's not just 2 teams. A lot of times we've had 2 undefeated teams that were the best teams in the country. Going back now, look at the rankings real quick as we're folding into championship weekend. There's 1 undefeated team.
Yeah, Oregon.
When's the last time that there's just been 1 undefeated team going into championship weekend? We've seen some Alabama-Florida games, but both teams are undefeated. There's 1 team. The parity this year is special. It's more like the NFL. It's kind of like, I think Lane Kiffin maybe made that card.
It's just so funny. It's so funny seeing Alabama on there as the only not double-digit win team.
Yes. Well, and again, like I said, there are 4 of 5 teams this year that had brutal schedules, and Alabama is benefiting from that. Yeah. They play more. They have 3 top 25 wins when a team like Miami hasn't even played a top 25 team. Bama's played 2 other top 25 games.
Yeah.
So, but I just can't look over the bad loss of Oklahoma. I think that should have put them. Even Vanderbilt. Like, Vanderbilt's lost, a couple of games down the stretch.
Yeah,
LSU
that should have been the
Tennessee
decider.
So you lose 2, Vanderbilt and Oklahoma. That's not a playoff team. They're going to get in, I think. I think SMU is going to beat Clemson, and Bama's going to get in. But it'll be more of a gripe this year than last year, them getting over Florida State.
Yeah. Of course, they get the cupcake route, or at least what we would assume is the cupcake route.
Yeah.
They might get Cinderella storied and end up losing that. But
what's crazy is, if Georgia gets blown out by Texas, should they make the playoff?
Only because of what the SEC give me or whatever.
Well, the winner gets in.
Yeah, so that'd be Texas winning the SEC and
Georgia would be 10-3 if they get blown out by Texas, which I don't think is going to happen.
And who's Georgia's losses again?
Georgia's losses are to Alabama and to was it 10? No, it wasn't 10. They beat Tennessee.
Yeah.
Ole Miss.
Oh, Ole Miss. So then,
they've lost to the number 2 and the number
13
team. 2 quality losses.
11 and 13, Alabama.
And both of them on the road. So, yeah. And they've beaten Texas and they've beaten Tennessee.
Then, yes, I would say Georgia still over Alabama would get a shot before, but they both get in regardless.
So you're thinking Bama, Tennessee, Georgia, and Texas are all going to get in. 4 SEC teams. Do you realize we could get Georgia and Texas for a 3rd time this year? That's like the NFL. Again, the teams playing each other in the playoffs for the 3rd time when they played, Eagles and Redskins.
I mean, if you...
I'm calling them Redskins.
Yeah. Hey, they're back to the Redskins. We're getting that back. I stuck with my guns.
But that would be like a division opponent playing each other in the playoffs for the 3rd time. It's happened a lot in the NFL. Yeah, we could see Georgia Texas for the 3rd time in the playoffs. But somebody is going to get... Arizona State and Boise State to go to the final. It's just.
Well, I mean, you've also got 3 Big Tens or 4 Big Tens. You got Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State, and Indiana.
Yes. So yeah, you get half the. You're going to see Boise. You're going to see Arizona State. I think is going to get in from the Big 12 as an automatic bid, even though they're out in the top 25.
Right.
So I think that puts Miami out. But yeah. We'll look into next week, and a little bit later in the show. But yeah, to me, that's Bama. Just so many years they've been right on the line, and every year they get in, and I think they get in again this year. So, I guess before we wrap up, the rest of last week, Chance had to talk about the Bama boys. One from Hueytown, one from Pinson.
We got Jameis from Hueytown. We got Bo from Pinson.
Pinson from Scottsboro. You can't give.
Oh yeah. I did do Scottsboro.
A couple years. What an entertaining game that was.
For a Monday Night Football game, that was awesome.
I would pay to sit at my house and watch those two battle again. Jameis, I'll let you read it out.
Okay, he had one of the greatest stats. He threw for a complete total of 668 yards, which is the most in a single game in NFL history. However, 171 of those yards were off of interceptions returned against him. So offensively, he only had 497 passing yards. But almost 500 passing yards in a Monday Night Football game. And he's not even the starter.
Browns record. French, that team's been playing for 100 years. And Jameis threw for the most yards. Again, like I texted you and your dad, Jameis giveth, Jameis taketh. He holds the NFL record for 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions.
Yeah. Which he's done better on that. His past 2 seasons, I think he has cut out more than like 70% of his interceptions from completions.
And Brett Powell will agree with me. I've been saying for 3 years, even on our former podcast, Final Answer, I guess it's not former, we'll still do stuff there, but he is a top 30 quarterback in this country or the world or whatever you want to say. He deserves to be a starter. Like, he is an incredible elite passer and proves it every time he gets a chance. He just needs to limit the mistakes. And as he said, hopefully the Lord can, take away the pick sixes from his life. But that's what's crazy to me is that when he throws interceptions, they get returned for touchdowns. Like, I don't know why that happens. A lot of them maybe on out routes or whatever the case may be. But
well, on one of those, even the announcer said, Jameis runs about a 5.2 second 40. So when he got up off the ground, you knew he wasn't going to catch him, but he still tries.
Even the end zone, that was just a bad interception. So like I said, he needs to clean that up. But he is better than a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL for sure, and should be a starter. And he's one of the most entertaining players. Bo looked good. I think Bo's got a great future in the NFL. He's got a great coach in Sean Payton to groom him. He's got some good receivers on the outside. Cortland Sutton is a great player.
Yeah.
I think, like I said, they get him a good running back, sure up that offensive line, maybe one more weapon on the outside. I think Bo's got a very bright future in Denver for sure.
Oh, yeah. Unfortunately, because I didn't pick him for my future bet, but Jaden Daniels is who I went with, but he's probably going to win MVP. Not MVP, Rookie of the Year. Yes. Rookie of the Year for NFL, Bo is. So that's awesome for him. And something about Jameis, too, you notice that every team he goes to play for, they all love him. Yeah. You don't hear any other players complaining about him. Even though he makes mistakes in the games, he takes accountability for it. He's never blaming the receiver or anything like that. He's learning from his mistakes, and he puts it to use later.
Do you not think that's crazy that the guy throws for 500 yards and he walks up to the podium and was like, I was awful. I didn't play well.
I think it's awesome. I don't think it's crazy. I think that's how leaders should be.
Yeah. And again, you saw he was the first one to congratulate Bo Nix. Always kind words. Jameis, I think more people have fallen in love with this guy than a player I think I've seen in the NFL in a long time. I think that there are a bunch of teams besides the Browns. Browns got Watson coming back. They got him a lot of guaranteed money. But Winston, I think, to me, is going to be coveted by a lot of teams.
Yeah.
Because quarterback is a very hard position to play. And to me, there's a lot of teams that need a quarterback. So Winston will be a starter next year. I think he's earned himself that right.
And he might just be that guaranteed vet that keeps going and getting picked up by every team, like a Cutler or something, where he's just going to be the backup for any injury purposes because he's still going to get you some wins.
Yeah, but again, I don't think backup. I think he's a starter.
I agree he's a starter. I just think some of these teams won't believe that right away still. They'll keep looking for him.
He's made a believer out of me. Even with the they've beaten the Steelers. They've beaten the Ravens. They could have had the Broncos, who are looking like they're going to be a playoff team. Right. So props to both those guys from Alabama. Love seeing them. And again, no offense, I don't want to say this much about Auburn, but a lot of Bama on Bama crime. We can't go to that game without talking about Jerry Jeudy
against
Levi Wallace.
Bama
on Bama crime.
No, it was against Surtain.
No, Surtain was some of the ones.
He was covering them a lot.
He was covering, but again, a lot of it. The big one was on Levi. A couple, but that Surtain is an all pro player. But yeah, it's funny to see a lot of these teams. You see, they end up going against each other, and they end up facing. And Surtain was Bama, so yeah, so it's still.
That's what I was saying. Surtain, and they were roommates and stuff together too, and buddies, and they were talking to each other before and after the game.
But it's just funny. I love seeing when players like that get. You see like. When Cadillac and Ronnie went to the pros together, like they're never going to go against each other. But I love seeing former teammates, like, getting to play, especially not many positions. you can do that at, where it's one-on-one a lot of times, like
exactly.
receivers. So, yeah, that was a really cool moment. And being a Titan Tigers, podcast like we are, I love seeing these guys in the NFL. And, so shout out to both those guys, former Alabama players, former Birmingham players. We love seeing that. But, yeah, we'll get to our segments with me and Chance talking about Alabama and Auburn in the game this week. And then we'll get to our picks for championship week here on Titan Tigers.
Later.